All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm the Wellness Program Administrator with Georgia State University's Employee Development and Wellness Services. And by trade, I am a registered dietitian. Before we get started today, just a few quick things. We are using the WebEx platform. So if you've got any questions, comments, anything like that during today's session, you can use the chat feature on the right side of the screen to enter those thoughts, and we'll be sure to address them at the end of today's presentation. Additionally, we are going to be recording today's session, so if you'd like to view it again or share it with a colleague, we'll be emailing out that recording as well as uploading it to our YouTube page, where you can find a list of past cooking demonstrations as well as various other wellness events that we conduct. So let's dive into it. Today's recipe is admittedly a very simple one, but there's a reason for that. And we're going to do things a little differently today. We'll be making the recipe like we normally do, but because today's recipe is so simple, we're going to actually break down the nutrition information in a little more detail than we might normally do during one of these programs. The reason for selecting today's recipe is I was actually having a conversation with a coworker at Georgia State, and we were talking about their nutrition and just kind of keeping up with some things. And one of the things they expressed to me was a feeling of, on their health journey, making all these great changes to their diet, to their physical activity, that they were missing some of the old foods that they used to eat, some of their favorites, their comfort foods. And they expressed that it sometimes feels like when you're trying to eat healthy, that there are certain foods that are just off limits, or certain foods that you can't really have a healthy version of. And I wanted to try to talk about that and talk about how we can take our favorite foods or our comfort foods and try to still make them a healthier version. And that's exactly what we'll be doing today. I'm sure most of you know how to make a standard grilled cheese at home. It's not exactly a secret or rocket science, but today we're going to be changing a couple ingredients and adding a few extra ingredients and seeing just how that impacts the nutritional quality of the food. So in terms of what you'll need today, very, very simple. We're going to have a cutting board, and we're going to be using a stovetop and a skillet. That's really the extent of the tools that you'll need. In terms of the things that are going into today's recipe, of course, we'll be using bread, we'll be using cheese, but we're going to be using several vegetables. We'll have a tomato, an avocado, and some mixed greens as well. And those are really going to be the highlight of this updated and kind of souped up grilled cheese that will not only taste delicious and have a fun variety of textures, but be nutritionally just a lot more significant, a lot healthier, and contribute to an overall good day of food. So let's get started. We're just going to go ahead and prep some of these vegetables here. We'll start with the tomato. Our goal is really just to cut it into slices that we can stack on the sandwich. You can make these reasonably thick if you've ever done, just like a turkey sandwich or a BLT or something like that. We want some, decent thickness to those slices. I've gone ahead and pre-rinsed this, so I'm just going to cut into it. And when it comes to tomatoes, they are really nutritionally excellent. I've mentioned a couple times on these demonstrations some of the nutrients that they contribute, and a big one is going to be lycopene. Lycopene is an antioxidant, so it's got some cancer-fighting properties, which is a really great thing to have in your diet on a regular basis. Tomatoes are they're superstars. So I like to pull them into salads, sandwiches, pastas, anything that I can add them to, it's great. So I've cut these into some slices, and then I cut the slices in half. And the reason for that is it's going to let me position them on the sandwich just a little bit better. Now, whenever you are making this, one tomato, one avocado will net you 2 total grilled cheeses. So if you want to batch cook this, if you want to make it for more people, keep in mind that for each whole tomato and avocado you have, you'll get 2 grilled cheeses out of it. Because we're putting, as you can see, about half a tomato onto the sandwich, which is a significant amount because we're really trying to pack in those vegetables. I'm going to move the rest of the tomato to the side for now because I'll just be cooking one today for demonstration purposes. For the avocado, I've also gone ahead and rinsed it. Even though we don't eat the outside of the avocado, you might think, well, I don't really need to rinse it. It's still a good idea. You're going to get any contaminants or dirt that may be on the outside because when we cut into the avocado, that knife is going to press into the skin. And if there's anything lingering on the outside of it, it may get pushed inside. So always a good idea to give them a quick rinse. Now for avocados, whenever you're selecting them, You want to get them ripe if you can, though you may have to buy them a little unripe and wait a day or two for them to really ripen. You'll know they're ready that if you squeeze on them, they'll yield a little bit to some pressure. So pressing into them with your fingertips lightly, you should feel a little bit of give. If you press into it and it just like collapses or sinks, I think that avocado is probably a little too past ripe, and it may be brown inside, it may be mushy. That's not quite what we're looking for. We want it to have a little resistance, but also a little give to it. So you'll find the top of the avocado here, and that's going to be our marker. If you've never cut into one before, we're going to line our knife up with it, and we're going to press gently down into it until you make contact with the middle of it. So in the middle is the pit. It's just a big brown sphere, and you're not going to be able to cut through that, so I wouldn't recommend trying. So you'll press your knife into it until you make contact, and then you're just going to gently rotate the knife around the avocado, and we're just cutting it in half, respecting that pit that's in the middle that we're not able to cut to. Right? Once you make it all the way around, if your avocado is nice and ripe, you should be able to pull it apart just like that. If your avocado maybe isn't quite as ripe as we want it to be, you may end up needing to wait a little bit longer, or you may have to apply a little more pressure and a little more force to it in order for that to work. So we're going to use half an avocado since we're just making the one sandwich here today. What we're going to do now is just cut this into some small slices. So taking the knife, I'm going to go vertically with the avocado and just cut some nice slices there. I'm not trying to cut all the way through the skin. We're not going to be including the skin in the sandwich since it's not edible. So I'm just cutting through like that. And once you've got those cuts, you can, if you prefer to use a spoon to keep your hand clean, you can do that. But we're going to just scoop out those slices. Before I do that, though, let's get our bread prepped here and talk about what we're doing to make that part of the sandwich a little bit healthier. A traditional grilled cheese might be on sourdough bread. It might be on white bread if you're just, keeping it simple with what you've got there. We're going to be using whole wheat or whole grain bread today, 100% whole wheat. And the idea behind that is that it is going to be significantly more nutritious. It's going to have more fiber, it's going to have more protein, and it's going to have more B vitamins and some minerals. All of that together means that we are getting a better nutritional value out of those two slices of bread, as opposed to it kind of just being carbohydrates and nothing else. So the whole wheat really helps magnify that. You can do other types of bread as well. We're looking for the whole grain choices with fiber, though. Some people may want to do sprouted grain bread. There are a lot of different things out there like flaxseed bread. Those are also going to have additional fiber and some additional nutrients. So you can mix that up however you see fit, but look for those ones with a good source of fiber that are 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain. In terms of cheese, we're just using 2 cheese slices today. So we're dialing down on the cheese a little bit. We're trying to emphasize the vegetable content. We're going to do 1 slice of cheddar on 1 piece of bread, and then we're going to do a slice of pepper jack on the other piece. Now, pepper jack is just Monterey Jack that has some jalapeno slices into it, giving it a little bit of a kick, a little more fun flavor. So we will be setting this up, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take some of my tomato slices and just stack them on one side. Again, this is pretty thick, but we're trying to make this a kind of meaty sandwich with these vegetables. It will also cook down and reduce in size a little bit once it gets to heat. Now, I'm going to just, like I said, pull apart these avocados and take these pieces out that I've made. Your hands may get a little messy, that's okay. Now, what we're doing with the avocado is avocados are kind of famous for being a very, very healthy fat source. And that's because they are high in the unsaturated fats, which are good for our heart and good for our health. So they give us all the nutrients that we want from fats, but we're not getting the saturated fat that can lead to some heart problems and some various other health issues. So we want this grilled cheese to still be creamy, to still be very rich and savory, but we don't want to do it all from cheese. Cheese is high in sodium, and it does have a decent bit of saturated fat in it. So by cutting down on the cheese and adding the avocado, we're making it heart healthier, but still giving it that richness that'll satisfy you and keep you full. So we've topped it with some tomato and some avocado. The next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of hot sauce. You can actually skip this step if you want to, but just a little bit of hot sauce, a couple drops, add some extra flavor and kick to it. I like things to be a little spicy, so I enjoy that. And now we're going to just top it with some greens. Spinach is a great green for this. You could also do kale if you wanted to. These are just some mixed greens here. And our goal is, again, to just stack this so that we're adding in more fiber, we're adding in more vitamins and minerals. Definitely things you wouldn't normally see on a grilled cheese, but that's how we're making it healthier. I'm adding roughly a third or half of a cup here to pack in some of that nutrition. And now I'm going to kind of press into those leaves because the sandwich is going to want to fall apart because it's so thick. And we're going to stack it like that, put that avocado piece back in there, and then just apply some pressure there to sort of pat it down. So using your skillet over here, I'm using olive oil cooking spray. I'm just going to lightly grease the skillet, and then I'm going to set it to a low heat. We'll give that just a second to heat up. And from here, all we're really going to be doing is kind of cooking our standard grilled cheese. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind because our sandwich is so tall and we've really packed it with vegetables. You may have to do a little extra maintenance work depending on how many you stacked on there. I got overzealous as always with my vegetables. But you can use a spatula to sort of scoop some of those things back in and try to keep them there. Because this is a very thick grilled cheese, I would recommend when you flip it to try to sort of brace the other side of it with something and then turn it over because you might spill something. If you do, it's not too big of a deal. You can kind of just scoop it back in. But know that that's the main difference between this and a standard grilled cheese is we're obviously cooking with a few extra ingredients here. So I'm going to take our sandwich and go ahead and press it in there. And using my spatula, again, I'm pressing it down, and we're going to give it a chance to cook. What our goal is here is to have the cheese start to melt and the bread start to brown. Once that bottom slice of bread is brown, we'll go ahead and flip it to the other side and continue cooking. But what I want to do now, while this is cooking for just a second over there, is let's talk about some of the nutrition information. Bear with me just a moment. I'm going to stop my video, and I want to share a slide so we can take a closer look at what exactly is happening when we make these changes. Okay, so hopefully you can see the slide on the screen right now while this grilled cheese is cooking in the background. So what we have here is on the left is our classic grilled cheese. So this is white bread. It's a little bit of butter in order to add some flavor to things. And then it's going to be a couple slices of cheese. This is kind of what is considered the standard for a lot of people. You may do it a little differently at home, but I think this is kind of a good average to go off of. What you'll notice looking at this is it's 460 calories, and I've highlighted a couple things in red that, as a dietitian, kind of get my attention. One thing I notice is that the saturated fat content is very, very high in a standard grilled cheese. I mentioned that saturated fat, unfortunately, is linked to some heart issues there, and we're seeing 90% of your daily limit for saturated fat in that single sandwich. And that's coming from things like the cheese and the butter adding up together to really hit pretty heavily there. The other thing I wanted to note was the fiber. So in the classic grilled cheese, there is only 1 gram of fiber. Fiber is important for keeping us regular and healthy. It allows us to feel fuller and more satisfied off a meal. It can help lower cholesterol. There are a lot of benefits to dietary fiber. And that classic grilled cheese, unfortunately, just doesn't really have anything to contribute. The white bread is very simplified. Cheese and butter don't really have fiber in them. So it's a little lackluster in that regard. On the right-hand side, what we can see is our avocado and tomato grilled cheese, the healthier version that we made today. So the benefit of this one is that despite all the changes we made, it's actually the same in terms of calories. So we haven't added calories, and we haven't actually reduced the calories either because we're adding healthy things back in, like the avocado. We can see the saturated fat content goes down significantly. We go from 90% down to 55%. So that's a pretty huge improvement by reducing things like the butter and the cheese and adding in the avocado. If we take a look at the fiber, you'll see that we go from 1 gram of fiber up to 10 grams of fiber, which is roughly a third of your daily fiber. So if you are trying to get that in, you're trying to fit in vegetables, this grilled cheese, which is an easy thing to make at home, a classic, something kids definitely enjoy, you can get a third of the daily fiber just by making those swaps and adding in those vegetables. Something else to note is the protein goes up. Because we're using whole wheat bread, we increase the protein content over the white bread, which makes this a little more nutritious. Protein's great for building and repairing muscles, keeping our tissues healthy. So this becomes an excellent source of that. And then one more thing to note down there at the bottom of the label is the potassium content. It was 2% in the classic grilled cheese, and it goes up to 15%. Potassium is a nutrient that a lot of Americans don't get enough of. The tomato helps us in this regard, and so do the other vegetables to a smaller extent, by contributing potassium to what we're doing. So that is just a brief overview of some of those benefits that happen whenever we make these swaps. Sometimes looking at a food and saying, oh yeah, I've made it healthier, I've added vegetables, that's great to do, but if you can break it down and really see this direct comparison, we're seeing all the areas where we're really improving this meal. And the good news is, I promise you, it comes out tasting delicious. I actually ate one of these a bit earlier today as I was making some of them, and it's so good. The avocado is so creamy, the vegetables really add some depth to it. So I'm going to stop sharing this for just a second, and we'll come back to the video here. Give me just a moment. Okay, so you should be able to see me again. So I'm going to actually turn the heat off over here. Our grilled cheese has had a good bit of time to cook. And we're going to remove it from the heat. Oh, that looks so good. I can smell the cheese. So just taking a look at it, again, if you think of a typical grilled cheese, you're either using just a couple slices of cheese and you've got this kind of measly, like wimpy little grilled cheese where you're trying to reduce the cheese, but you're thinking, well, now I'm still hungry. I don't feel like there's enough here. Or you've packed it full of cheese and it's super thick, but nutritionally, we've added a bunch of salt. We've added a bunch of saturated fat. It's just not quite what we could strive for when we're trying to balance a meal. Now, instead, we've got a lot more depth and variety to this. We've got the greens, we've got the tomatoes, we've got this orange, red, and green, these bright colors popping out of there. And I can, of course, peel it up and show you some of the cheese and stuff in there. There's that nice steam coming out of it. And this is just, I find it to be a much more satisfying meal. If you've ever eaten something that you found yourself hungry, maybe 30 minutes later or an hour later, a lot of times, if there's not fiber in it or there aren't healthy fats in it, it moves through us pretty quickly because it's such a simple combination of foods. And we may find ourselves snacking again or overeating a little bit later. By adding the tomato and the greens and the avocado, we ensure that this is a rich and wholesome meal full of fiber, healthy fats, and a great amount of protein. And again, as you saw, this is probably the simplest cooking demonstration I've ever done. You can whip one of these up in about 5 minutes. So on a day where maybe you haven't fully planned for lunch, or if you've got friends, family members, or kids who might be in the household with you and you need to make something quick that's a crowd pleaser, this is a really nice way to take a fan favorite like a grilled cheese and bump up in terms of nutritional quality so that you can feel like you're still doing good for your body while eating something that I know a lot of people really enjoy. So that's really it. It is a very simple recipe. We are going to send out a copy of what I did today where you'll be able to see the breakdown of ingredients, the nutrition label, and the various steps. Like I mentioned, using 1 avocado and tomato, this is designed to really cook 2 sandwiches at a time, but you can, of course, scale it however you want. If you want to store the rest of your avocado for later to prevent it from browning, you can add a little bit of lemon juice to it and put it in an airtight container in the fridge. Similar to what you do with a sliced apple if you've ever done that trick before. The lemon juice helps prevent it from oxidizing and turning brown, so that'll help keep it a little bit longer. And any leftover tomato or greens, of course, store in an airtight container in the fridge as well, and then you can make them again later. If you do want to batch cook it though, these sandwiches work great. I made about 4 of them earlier today when I was testing some things. You can, if you want to wrap them individually, you can do that, or just put them all in a large container in the fridge. They reheat very well. I've always been a fan of cold leftovers with cheeses too, but if you want to microwave them or even just kind of pop them in a toaster oven, that would work for you too. So that's really it for today. I do see we've got a message or two in the chat that I want to address here real quick. Okay, so this is a question that's talking about what our options might be when it comes to really exchanging ingredients with this. So First, I'll talk about the fact that there's cheese in this. If any of you out there are entirely plant-based and you are vegan, you don't want to do anything that's from an animal, cheese is obviously going to be something that we have to flag in this recipe. There are plant-based cheeses out there that you might be familiar with. Swapping out the 2 slices that we used for this for 2 slices of the plant-based cheese will absolutely work. Plant-based cheeses tend to melt a little bit differently, but since we're cooking this all within a sandwich, we don't have to worry too much about that, and it'll end up working out in terms of just swapping those things. I do encourage you to look at the protein content of some of the cheese alternatives, though, because they can vary, and not all of them may match up to this quite as well. So if you see that and you notice it, you may want to balance out the meal a little bit by finding another way to add in protein. If you're a vegan, you might be familiar with nutritional yeast. It's sort of a seasoning. That's a great way to add some extra protein to things. In terms of the vegetables that you can do, one of my favorite combinations of foods is broccoli and cheese. So you can also do a broccoli grilled cheese. You want to cut the florets up into really, really small pieces, though, so they cook properly. But chopping up some broccoli like that, adding in the middle with the cheese if you wanted to take out the tomato, or you could keep it in. But doing a broccoli grilled cheese would be another healthy method. And using that whole wheat bread, again, is going to reinforce a lot of this, too. If some of the things I talked about today seem a little overwhelming because we're taking something like a grilled cheese and making a lot of changes to it, remember that you can make any one of these changes at a time, and you're still doing yourself a little bit of a healthy step to move towards something that's a bit more balanced. So maybe you just want to start with the bread, or you just want to start by reducing the cheese or adding some avocado to it. Be flexible and try to give yourself some time to adapt to things. If you don't find that all the ingredients in there together at the same time is something you can do, just start small and take those little steps and you'll be able to get there. But the important thing to remember whenever we're looking at a healthy diet is that even our favorite foods, even foods that we might think, oh, there's no way a grilled cheese could be healthy, there are things we can do to try to balance it, bring in other food groups, and make it work for us. So great question. Okay. So that was the main question there. There were a couple of questions kind of talking about different substitutions. There was someone who mentioned potentially using animal products. So making it into, I guess it'd almost be more like kind of a panini if you wanted to add in like grilled chicken or something like that. That's absolutely something you can do. If you're ever trying to reduce the use of cheese because of the sodium or the saturated fat content, dialing back the cheese and adding in a lean protein, like some small pieces of grilled chicken, could work very well in this. Keeping in mind that my sandwich was pretty tall, it does cook down a little bit, but if you start to stack a lot of ingredients in there, you might just have to be a little extra careful as you're cooking them. And let me just check one more time to make sure I didn't miss anything. Right, so it looks like those were all the questions. So thank you again, everyone, for attending today. As a reminder, we're going to send out the recipe and the nutrition label so you can see this. We'll be sure to include a copy of the recording and upload it to our YouTube page as well if you'd like to see more. You'll also get a link to a short survey where you can just let us know what you thought of today's demonstration. I know this was definitely a simpler one, so I'd love to hear if you are interested in seeing more really quick and simple ones, or if you'd prefer to stick to some of the longer, little more involved recipes. I know there's something out there for everyone, so if you want to share your thoughts of what you thought of today's session, we'd really appreciate that. Last thing I want to mention is we do have a lot of events going on. Tomorrow we have our guided meditation event at noon, so if you're interested in that, you can go to our web calendar and sign up for that and join us tomorrow. It's from 12 to 12:30. The other thing I want to mention is it is Employee Appreciation Month. And one of the things that EDWS is partnering with to celebrate is we are actually doing a GSU Walking Steps Challenge. We've been recruiting people for the challenge this week, and we've already got several people signed up for it. I think we're at about 30 or so people right now. Last year, we had a really great number and a really great turnout. That challenge is actually going to start next week on Monday, April 18th, and it'll run until Friday, April 22nd. The goal is to be active, track your steps, and just have a friendly competition with other people as we encourage movement throughout this month of April and throughout celebrating employee appreciation. If you're interested in joining our Steps Challenge, you can email me, rsmith250@gsu.edu, and I can sign you up for the challenge. You can also go to the GSU Employee Appreciation website and see a list of all the events that they'll be offering, including our walking challenge. I'll be sure to type my email in the chat here in just a moment, so if any of you would like to email me and sign up, you can do that right away. With that being said, again, I appreciate everyone's attendance today and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.